section of all of that for really 25 plus years, and worked on a lot of certificate authority deployments and SSL deployments for banking. During my Netscape days, we actually partnered with DigiCash. If anybody remembers that company, didn't go very well, but we did. And so, I had the long hair, the earring, cyberpunk days, going back to the early '90s, believe it or not. But look, when I read the white paper, couldn't have been more than 3 months after he posted it. I was working on a remittance project in Haiti at the time. And the timing was incredible because it was just one frustration after another on dealing with cross-border money transfer regulation, people trying to stop me, and we just had an earthquake now in Haiti, and the damage and the devastation from the last one, even though it wasn't as powerful, was much worse because it was right in the capital. And remittances couldn't get in the island. The Western Union outlets were literally buried under rubble. And so anyway, this became super interesting to me, and immediately I said, wow, this could really solve a lot of problems if you could eliminate a lot of these regulated intermediaries, lower the costs. There's some challenges, but from a kind of a middleware perspective at the time, I wasn't thinking digital gold yet because it wasn't worth anything. But this is really interesting. And then as the months went by, I really dug in more, and I said, wow, this is incredible. Personally, I started to get into it, started mining a little bit once I could figure out how to install the software. And then over a couple of years, infrastructure started to develop. We had Mt. Gox. You could actually get Liquid, which actually started to show me, hey, you could actually use this as a middleware layer because you can get money in and out on both sides. And anyway, so that really pushed me down the rabbit hole of trying to see if could you build a bank replacement using Bitcoin to facilitate financial inclusion. Obviously, today that means also speculation. But at the time, it was, could I do it for payments? Could I do it for money transfer? Other forms of financial inclusion, potentially lending, small dollar lending, cross-border lending, all things that are super interesting to me today, where I immediately saw the opportunity evolve for Bitcoin and to help a lot of people.
So that's crazy to me that you were so early on the email list of this white paper going out and having access to this and just kind of recognizing that there's something really unique about this. What was one of the things that kind of just struck you early on with the white paper?
We all knew that the Holy Grail was solving the double spend problem. And when I first read it the first time, I was like, I think this guy thinks he's solved the double spend problem. And I looked at it and I said, I think I understand what he's saying. Now I read the white paper and you can I almost understand every sentence, but I've read it 600 times. The first time I read it, it's like, I think this guy's full of crap because he or she thinks that they're going to use every single computer in the world to solve this problem. And I don't think that's realistic. So I kind of brushed it aside. And then a couple other people in the mailing list mentioned it to me and asked me, I said, hey, Bill, I know you're interested in this this digital currency banking stuff. Have you really dug in on this paper? Do you have an opinion? And I went back to it again and again, and I said, man, there's something here. I mean, the audacity to think that you could do this to solve the double spend problem was just gnawing at me. And again, I wasn't thinking digital gold, wasn't thinking this would be a monetary system yet. I was just enamored with the idea that you could have a trustless solution to the double spend problem. And that was pure tech perspective, which is what most of us had in the early days. Could this even work?
Is that why you started mining it then? Is because that was the issue or the thing that you kind of found to be maybe not practical?
I wanted to understand it, honestly. But that wasn't, when I say right away, I wasn't mining yet. This was literally weeks after it was released, the white paper. I don't even think you could at that point. I don't think the software was released. So it took me a while to come around to say, okay, there's something here, right? And then it was a few months later, then I basically tried to get the software to run and I couldn't get it to run and it was really buggy and, the make files didn't work and all this other stuff. And finally I figured out how to get it to run. And actually there was an engineer at my last company that helped me to get it running. Yeah, I don't even remember all the details, but I think it was built on Windows originally, and I wasn't even using Windows at that point.
Wi-Fi now disabled.
And so I don't remember what he did, but he did something to help me get it to run. I just remember it was like the fans started spinning on this Windows laptop when we got it to run finally.
You involved in much of the forums? Because the forum posts that I go back and read just were so enlightening, and there was more that was shared in the forums just beyond the white paper. Was that anything that you were participating in?
I read them. I didn't know enough. I was out of date already on crypto and the hashing algorithms and all that stuff to ask intelligent questions. there was a lot of questions in the early days, like civil tax and stuff like this. And it was already like, I understood the questions, but I didn't know enough to figure out how to ask the questions. So I'm like this guy, I've studied computer science, but it was a long time ago. In Netscape, I wrote a little code, and as time went on, I wrote less and less code. Now I can read the code, but you wouldn't want me to write it. So I'm at a point now where I'm kind of really annoying for our tech guys, because like I'll get involved even though I probably have no right to be involved. But because of where I came from, I understood the implications of what he was trying to do.
Amazing story. So you start Abra. What time frame are we talking that you start the company?
13, maybe late 13. Really like a driving interest, like just pure spec. Access to wealth was interesting to me, but just the idea of running an order book wasn't in my DNA. I know how to do it. I worked at Goldman, but I started a company just to do that at the time. I wish I had in hindsight, but I didn't. So the idea of using Bitcoin as the basis for banking was really the original idea. And I would say I was really all in by early 15, maybe mid 15 at the latest, trying to figure out how to do this. No, you couldn't hire people. Most investors weren't interested. What the hell is Bitcoin? Banks won't talk with banks, as they were shutting me off. I had no employees, and we had no software. They were still shutting my accounts down.
What were they saying the reason down was?
I think FinCEN had already issued their guidance around access, which basically points to money transfer rules and whatnot. And also you could Google me and find out that I used to run a remittance. You put two and two together, and that was it. And it was nothing nefarious. Like I said, I didn't need a bank account to run the business except to pay employees. So finally, I was able to work that out, and it's all good. But it's a little different today. You can get a bank account to pay employees if you're in the crypto space. To store customer funds is another story, but certainly to pay employees. So, it was a lot of heavy lifting to figure out what could you really do with crypto that is useful in the early days of Bitcoin. I mean, nobody said crypto, it was Bitcoin, right? In the early days of Bitcoin, could it be useful for anything? And that was really tough. And I'm a very skeptical person by nature, but I also knew the magnitude of the problems and the holes left in the banking system for these kind of bottom half of the pyramid, not just the destitute, but the entire bottom half of the pyramid.
Well, it was interesting because this is whenever I first started coming into it is in the 15 time frame that you're talking about. And I just remember distinctly back then, it was just so speculative. Like the price was in the 200 range. Later in that year, it started going up to 300 or whatever, 400. I just kind of remember that we had no idea like the speed at which this might take place. I just remember looking at previous price charts, and I know it went up to 1,000, and that it just crashed extremely hard, 80% down, and it seemed to be finding some footing there. But no one had any type of expectation of like what the code was doing and this idea of it becoming scarcer. I mean, we understood that was part of the process, but we didn't really fully understand how these 4-year cycles were really going to like create these waves of adoption, I guess. I guess I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes back in that time frame. You didn't want to do it just as like a speculative exchange. You were thinking in a banking kind of way, which I guess for me, I wasn't even like remotely in that frame of mind back at that point. So walk us through some of that.
I had two kind of competing perspectives, which still didn't really involve pure speculation from a business perspective. I'm a hardcore libertarian, right? I always had this perspective pre-Bitcoin that the Federal Reserve should have competition. And I had written an outline for a book on this that I don't think I've ever talked about, actually. I think it was in the late 90s I wrote this outline that, there should be multiple Feds. I mean, you wouldn't call it that. You would just have competition. And this was even before I read, a lot of the Austrian economists' ideas on the topic about private money. And they did a way better job of explaining it than I ever could. And I give those papers to people all the time now. But I had this innate idea that the government shouldn't have a monopoly on money, right? Without knowing full tilt that there was this whole Austrian school about it and, Ron Paul's ideas about it. And then I had this second idea that we've got to solve this money transfer problem. We've got to solve this remittance problem. We've got to make banking and lending accessible and capitalism accessible to everyone, because that's the rising tide that lifts all boats, to me, having watched it in firsthand in time I spent in Asia and other places. And so could Bitcoin facilitate this? I was researching for a short TED talk I did for a closed session at TED on Bitcoin when it was, I think it was trading about $1. And I came up with this crazy concept of marrying these two ideas I had. One, could it basically be the basis for money transfer, payments, and banking? And two, I had just recently read comments that a group at the UN had decided that the dollar wasn't a viable reserve currency anymore. And this was basically this talk, and I merged the ideas and said, hey, is it possible that you could end up with a non-government actor creating a reserve currency? And could it end up being a trustless currency like this? Now, I just said in 2 sentences way better what I could have said in 2012 because we didn't have any lingo for any of this, by the way.
Yeah.
Things have changed a lot. And so I was just flying by the seat of my pants to try to make a point that this trustless system that no one had ever seen before, in theory, with no off switch already, which was super powerful already, even in 2012, it was the most powerful supercomputer in the world, right? If you just looked at its collective hash power back then. And could that become the basis for a new monetary system? And that was simply the question that I asked back then. And it was only a result of the fact that I'd had this gnawing idea in the back of my mind. But why do we simply outsource money to the government automatically? And we just blindly accept it. It makes no sense to me. It doesn't true. It does make sense to me why many people blindly accept it. But we shouldn't. We should question it at least, and then maybe accept it or not. I obviously come out on the or not side of it, but we should at least question it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you're looking at the promise that your buying power of the work that you've already performed is going to be eroded no matter what, I'm with you 100%. It makes perfect sense.
There's access as well, right? So there's two parts to a monetary system. There's what is the store of value and what preserves that store of value. For a lot of people, they don't care about that. For example, if you send remittances to Mexico, most of that money is spent before it's received. They're not overly concerned with the peso's purchasing power over time. Okay, at least not intuitively. It wouldn't be intuitively obvious they should be. What they're concerned is, can they get the money? Is it cheap? How much money did they have to lose in sending the money they got? How easy was it to get? And if the banks or ATM machines are offline, am I screwed? That's what kind of goes through the mind of certain people in certain segments of the population. But then there's, of course, our segment of the population, which is we're getting screwed because we simply have the proverbial finger on the print button. It's not that simple, but that's more or less what's happening. And so both of those things are happening at the same time with the same monetary system. And different people have different perspectives on why that matters to them without thinking about the other person's perspective at all.
So talk to us more about the mission of the business. So you stand up the company. Was the idea to always kind of go into this borrowing and lending piece of Bitcoin? So talk to us about that.
Not the way we're doing it, certainly today, but it was. I mean, my mission remains the same, and that is to build a global bank that democratizes access to anything that we do. I want to offer services to every single person on this planet. Now, that's not realistic for every feature we launch out of the gate on day one, but that's the end game for me. I want to build a global bank with crypto and Bitcoin at its core, smart contracts, Bitcoin, all of it, and enable all forms of lending, wealth management, payments, money transfer, and displace the middleman, right? The way I looked at it is that from the earliest days of Netscape, where I watched businesses get disintermediated from the inside out by software and the internet, that has not happened in banking, right? We have the nice, lipstick on a pig kind of model of banking software where the web apps or the mobile apps look cool, but it's the same core, it's the same Fed, it's the same repo markets, it's the same interbanking markets, it's the same BIS we've had, same BS we've had for 100 years. It has not been disintermediated from the inside out. This is our opportunity. That's our mission, is to help facilitate that. Now, we may put ourselves out of business over time, right? Because over time, it may turn out that all of this can become trustless, and you don't need a company like Abra to facilitate any of the services that we're facilitating. And it's possible, right? It's possible we become a pretty front end on a lot of different things. Today, we're not there. you need a custodian. You need, I know a lot of people don't agree with me, but you need the custodian, you need the service provider, you need liquidity management because we have an existing banking system. And you need the hard line into the matrix, as I call it, to make these things work. We may not in 25 years. That may be great, I don't know, but we do today. And so that's how I look at it, is how can we facilitate democratization of access to all financial services on the assumption that they're all going to be crypto-based in the coming decades.
So let's talk about the policy side of things. This infrastructure bill was massive for just like everybody in the space is talking about the few lines of descriptions that were in this bill. The amount of conversation, the amount of buzz around it was crazy. So
yeah, I wonder if Moses had as much feedback when he came down the mountain. I mean, it's crazy what's been going on for these 4 lines of text.
So talk to us how you're perceiving, as a person who's in the borrowing and lending space and perceiving the terminology that really seems like it's going to evolve is digital asset and digital asset security. Seems like the two big catches, the two big buckets.
That's right. So I think that there's so many things happening at once here, and I was shocked. I don't know if you saw the video that I shared that Ted Cruz put out, which went total. I think it was the most retweeted tweet I've ever had in my umpteen years on Twitter, where he basically said, there's not 5 of us in the Senate who actually understand what the hell this thing is, and yet we're willing to regulate it to hell. He's absolutely right? It makes no sense whatsoever. So let's put that aside. Let's, those of us on the inside, we accept the fact that they don't know what it is, but they're going to do something anyway and accept that. I mean, look at the bit license, right? I mean, the bit license shouldn't exist in that form. That was hastily written, before Bitcoin was really even a big thing, and mostly in response to the FinCEN guidance, right? So without actually understanding where the market was going to go. And that's my big fear here. And the other thing I'll say is words matter, right? So the IRS or Treasury is trying to make the case now, well, that's not really our intent by basically, extrapolating this potentially broad definition of broker. Well, as a citizen, I have to look at this and go, well, yeah, I guess you can try to interpret intent, and we do that all the time. We back to the original, Federalist Papers, whatever, but you don't need to here. If this is your intent and you're in cahoots with the people who are writing it, fix the damn language. The words matter. It's not that hard. And so since it's not that hard, really, given that they are in cahoots, you have to take a step back and go, okay, why are they really leaving it this way? Why are they giving themselves such broad leeway to interpret the word broker any way they want, to potentially go after a software developer or a miner? Do I really believe they're going to do that in the next 3 years? Probably not. Does my opinion matter? Probably not. The fact remains that they have broad-based leeway according to this document to do that. And you get another nut in FinCEN or the IRS or the SEC who interprets this some other way, look out. And so that's very worrisome, and I think it deserves a fight. And I have to agree with Senator Cruz on this. They don't know what they're doing. And so, or they do know what they're doing, which is even scarier.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break and hear from today's sponsor. All around the world, tech companies are innovating and driving returns for investors. Our Crowd analyzes companies across the global private market, selecting those with the greatest growth potential, then brings them to you. Their in-depth due diligence includes meeting with management teams and generally comprehensive vetting of deals. From personalized medicine to cybersecurity to robotics, quantum computing, and more. In state-of-the-art labs, startup garages, and anywhere in between, Our Crowd is identifying innovators so you can invest when growth potential is greatest, early. Our Crowd's accredited investors have already invested over $1 billion in growing tech companies, and many of their members have benefited from the 46 IPOs or sale exits of their investments. Once Our Crowd has selected a deal, they offer accredited investors the opportunity to invest alongside them with the same terms. As you review deals, you have access to Our Crowd's investor relations team, who you can talk to directly on the phone about your personal investment goals. Now you can truly diversify your portfolio by investing early in innovative private market companies at Our Crowd. Join the fastest growing venture capital investment community at ourcrowd.com/study. That's ourcrowd.com/study.
Hey, small business leaders, are you looking for an easier way to onboard and manage remote employees? JustWorks makes it easier for you to start, run, and grow a business. Let me tell you how JustWorks can help your business. JustWorks is the ultimate HR platform for small and growing businesses with simple software and expert support for benefits, payroll, HR, and compliance. Across the country, small businesses with big dreams love JustWorks for its simplicity, intuitive platform, and time-saving features. Whether your team is remote or in person, you can give them access to national large group health insurance plans and manage onboarding, payroll, PTO, and compliance all in one place. Sure, you can do it all, but why do it all alone? Learn how JustWorks can help. With JustWorks, you can onboard new employees with ease, take the guesswork out of employment and tax regulations, access national health insurance plans, and save hours on time tracking that syncs with payroll. And don't worry, they have 24/7 expert support. So find out how JustWorks can help your business by going to justworks.com. That's justworks.com for more information.
I don't know about you, but I don't love the idea of big data to the point that everyone knows everything you're doing all the time. For example, did you know that if you set up shop at a cafe or a hotel or an airport and you connect to their Wi-Fi, everything you're doing is being looked at by somebody else? Honestly, in this day and age, a smart 12-year-old could hack your computer with cheap hardware. And here's the thing, your data is valuable. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per person selling personal info on the dark web. So that's why for my online insurance needs, I use ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN creates a secure encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. Hackers can't steal your personal data. And since I'm not very tech savvy, I love the fact that you can just fire up the app and click one button to get protected. It works on your phones, your laptops, tablets, and more. And you can secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/TIP. That's expressvpn.com/TIP. And you can get an extra 3 months. expressvpn.com/TIP.
All right, back to the show.
Yeah, I kind of side on the first take, but you don't know. Are they saying that, or do they actually know what they're doing?
You said something else, by the way. You said they're going to fight DeFi.
Yeah.
And I'm struggling with that one. Because I don't think that they can, and I think themselves DeFi aren't D, meaning there's an off switch, right? And so if you can go after the off switch and you fall under existing regulation, in their opinion, you should expect they're going to come after you. It's the difference between running Uniswap, the web page, and Uniswap, the protocol, or a DeFi protocol that you can't shut off because it's sufficiently, the contracts are out there and are running on a, let's call it, sufficiently decentralized system like Ethereum with no off switch, okay? I believe that they would recognize that they can't shut off those services, and they would also recognize there's no one to go after, unless you want to put somebody in jail for doing something that is already out there and can't be shut off, which, BitTorrent has already shown us they'll go after the users and fail before they'll go after Bram, the protocol creator. So I do think there's going to be a lot of cases brought against services that market themselves purely as DeFi but aren't truly D. And we'll see how that plays out. But I think there's going to be a lot of rude awakenings in the coming months.
I get the impression that Gary Gensler views it as there's Bitcoin and then there's everything else. Do you see it that way? And how much does that matter that Gary Gensler feels that way versus all the other participants and key stakeholders that are involved in this?
There was an interesting public comment from, I think it was a Republican, I want to say congressperson who's on the oversight committee related to the CFTC, who said, hey, you're overreaching here. You of all people know the difference between the CFTC's writ and your writ in the SEC. Now, he understands crypto tech better probably than his counterpart overseeing the CFTC, and I don't know that for sure, but I'm guessing, having taught at MIT, and I spent time with him when I presented there, that he does know what he's talking about, at least in terms of how it works at a very high level, like kind of like mine. I'm not a coder anymore, but at a high level he can explain it. And so, but he's totally wrong. A lot of what he said at the Aspens, I agree with in terms of their ability or the CFTC's ability to go after some of these DeFi services under certain circumstances. But the automatic assumption that everything is a security is just nonsense. Even enforcement will tell you it's facts and circumstances. The lawyers will tell you it's facts and circumstances. Okay, what are the facts and what are the circumstances? And so, they're going to have to pick and choose their battles because, fortunately, he's not going to get the army of people he probably wants from Congress. He's going to get more, but he's not going to get an army. they will pick and choose their battles, and they'll go cherry picking people who are probably running, basically either issuing security tokens or enabling the exchange of security tokens and DeFi services, whatever. They're certainly going to go after them. I have very little doubt about that. I do think that a lot of the comments around everything as a security don't resonate with me, right? Ethereum is not a security. I'm sorry to my Maximalist friends. Migrating to proof of stake does not turn Ethereum into a security. Cardano is not a security. These systems use utility tokens as gas. Maybe the way they raised money by today's standards was a security offering. You can make that case, but that ship has sailed. They had no guidance. They didn't go after anyone in those days, and to do what they did, and for example, in the Ripple case now makes no sense. I believe what Ripple did was a security offering when they raised the money, but to wait 7 years, I'm guessing billions of dollars later to go after it makes no sense.
Do you think that they're doing the Ripple case to try to set a precedence or some type of case law that then be used against other protocols and developers and whatnot? Do you think that they strategically picked Ripple because they saw that as being their highest probability of getting a favorable win?
Well, they don't want to lose. If you're an enforcement, you're going to go work in private practice at some point, and you really have a track record of losing and picking bad cases, I'm guessing. On the other hand, right now, crypto is a shiny object. So if you're an enforcement and you have the ability to choose what kind of case you work on, I'm guessing right now, if you could choose, you'd probably prefer to work on a crypto case. So you got to combine that. You want to work on a crypto case, and you want to work on a crypto case you don't want to lose. So in there, somewhere, is the belief on someone's part that what Ripple is doing as a company is a security offering, they're wrong, and we can win. Otherwise, I don't think they go into this thinking, we have no chance of winning this, but we'll make life difficult for them for 5 years. I just find that hard to believe.
How about the time frame? So none of that has even taken place, and then after it does, we're talking like 2-3 years before any of this becomes real. And I just think about how much this market
between now and then as well, or broken more.
What do you mean by that?
You can have bills that fix wording in the definition of a broker. You could have bills that actually make it worse, in theory, right? Moving targets. To your point about it won't be adjudicated for a few years, you don't know who the interpreter is going to be on the who just doesn't understand the original intent and decides to go full tilt towards our worst fears. Who knows what that could mean? It could mean another China 2 where we migrate mining out of the U.S. again 3 years from now. I pray that's dreaming that could even happen, but I don't think it's a zero probability outcome that, given the current wording, that you could end up with someone in a regulatory position of power who could interpret this that way for whatever political reason they choose to do so. I would say the odds are against it happening, but it's a non-zero probability, which is why this needs to be fixed.
So I saw you commenting, retweeting some of Caitlin Long's posts recently and kind of what she has going on with Avanti. How are you viewing her decisions from a regulatory standpoint? She seems to be really kind of understanding at a very high level where this is all going. So help us understand some of the thoughts that how you see what she's doing and how she's positioning herself, and then maybe how that applies to you at Abra.
It's super interesting. We talk every once in a while. She's brilliant. I mean, her ability to go deep on this stuff is just awesome. Thank God we have her in the community, not just for Avanti, but in the community at large. So Caitlin, thank you for what you do. We've come at this from a different perspective. I understand originally the money transfer, kind of FinCEN guidance on prepaid access. I've been a prepaid card issuer. It just turns out that in the early days of crypto, most of the regulations stemmed from that world because we didn't have the idea of Bitcoin or virtual currencies in that regard in existing regulation. So FinCEN, IRS, and others states used that existing regulation and layered on top. Turns out I came from that world. She came this more of an eye from the traditional banking world. And, so we're kind of meeting in the middle now in terms of our understanding of where this is all going. I mean, she's taking a very ambitious approach in terms of being able to issue true dollars, not just even stable coins, true dollars through Avanti and being able to access the Fed directly. And, we'll see. I think she'll get it done. I think it's going to be tough. I think the fact that she's servicing institutions only and not retail is probably the main reason why she'll be able to get it done in the next couple of years. I think somebody doing what she's trying to do directly for retail would have it 5 times harder at least. But we'll see. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm bullish